In .NET 9, we now have the ability to convert our solution files from an SLN file to an SLNX file. Let's see what this change does and why it's important in this 10-minute training video. Now, for most of my training, I work to give you an in-depth perspective on technology. But sometimes you just need a quick answer to the question, how do I do this, or why does this exist? That's why I created this 10-minute training series. So here we have a Blazor web app project. And it's right out of the box, file new project, that's it. But because I create an auto solution for Blazor web app, we have two projects. So that's, really simple project, and it created an SLN file for us. Now, real quick, what does an SLN file do? Well, it's just a bucket that holds your projects. That's pretty much all it does, is it tracks which projects are, in that same bucket. They're not even necessarily associated with each other. So all it does is just track, hey, when I open up my solution, what do I display underneath me? Well, that's these two projects. So let's look at what that looks like in VS Code. Because in Visual Studio, we can't open up a solution file directly without unloading all the projects. But in VS Code, I can come to that same solution. Notice there is our solution demo and our solution demo client. There's our, our two projects. But let's look at the solution file, and that's the solution file. So it says, okay, we've got the Visual Studio version and the minimum studio version. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but we're version 17, even though Visual Studio is 2022. That's the year, not the version number. There's a little confusion there, but we're using Visual Studio 17, but the minimum Visual Studio version is 10. And there's a project GUID, the solution demo, a different project GUID for the client. And we've got these end projects here, and we've got some globals here with a bunch more GUIDs and different type of build configurations and all the rest, right? That's a lot of stuff. And there are some problems with these solution files. For example, if you want to manually edit this, good luck. You're going to mess that up. And there can be merge conflicts that are caused by this file, because this file is crazy messy, and it's grown over time, and it's a mess. Lots of GUIDs, not really human readable, and it contains information that's redundant and not really necessary. So, for example, why do we need to know this stuff, right? That is not really necessary. So what can we do with this? Well, we can look at upgrading to the SLNX file. So to do that, first in Visual Studio, this is a preview feature, meaning it's something that you have to turn on in Visual Studio. You have the regular version of Visual Studio, but under Tools, Options, coming down here to Preview Features, scroll to the bottom, and you will see this Use Solution File Persistence Model. Turn that on. So that's going to enable the SLNX file format. Okay, with that, now you can do this with a command line as well. I'm going to show you Visual Studio because it's the easiest one, I think. You can also do this with VS Code if you have the C# dev kit, and the dev kit does support the SLNX file. But if you select your solution file, notice we're not opening anything, unlike the projects, because we can't open the solution file while it's being used. But if you have a solution file selected and you say File, and then you say Save As, Save Solution Demo App.sln as, you can do this drop down right here and select XML Solution File, or SLNX. When you do that, hit Save, nothing seems to happen. But let's open up VS Code, and notice we now have a solution file and a SLNX file. Now, at this point, I encourage you to delete your SLN file, but we now have both in the directory. It doesn't delete it for you. But let's open up the SLNX file. That's it. That's the entire file. It just says solution, and there's the two projects. So let's go back over here to this original one. Well, it said, hey, we don't need to have all this stuff. We don't even need to have a GUID. All we need to have is the path to our project files. We don't have to have this project and end project and the parentheses and the equals and all the rest. Don't need to have that. And then down here, we don't need to have this, debug and release and pre-solution and all this stuff. This stuff is just the defaults. So if we haven't changed anything, we don't need to have this in the project. Therefore, it's going to assume the defaults unless you make a change, and that's going to put it in the SLNX file, but in a cleaner way. So This is the new solution file. Now, does this do anything magical? No, it's still a bucket. Okay, it's still the bucket. It's still going to open up the same way. It's still going to, have those two projects in it. But the difference is this is much more human readable and human editable. So that's a bonus. And it's much easier when you have a merge conflict because you can see what the problems are, see what the merge issues are, and say, oh, person A added a third project. I don't have that third project, or I have a different third project. Let's just merge those in. We can do that manually, not a problem. So that makes merge conflicts easier. And it really cleans this file up, which means it can be much easier to be maintained by other tools as well. Now, again, is this an earth-shaking thing? No, not really. It's a good quality of life upgrade, especially for bigger projects, especially for if you have a large project where you might be large solution where you're adding multiple projects to it or have a lot of things that are different moving parts. They could cause, again, things like merge conflicts and a need for manual editing. So that's what the SLNX file is. It now has an icon. It didn't have that originally. Again, this is kind of a preview thing that I've been working on, and it's rolling out slowly. But you can also double click on SLNX file and it will open. So they're slowly getting this into everywhere and treating it as if it's an SLN file as well. Now, can you open up an SLNX file like you can a CS project file? No, you still can't do that. Now, personally, I think that solution files aren't going to be around forever. I think that eventually we can get these, make the solution files optional or some other way because of the fact that they really are just a bucket. They're just a bucket that says, hey, when I open up these projects. That's pretty much all I do. So eventually it can happen, but there's a lot of tooling changes I think that need to happen and a lot of code changes that need to happen and some backward compatibility issues and all the rest. But for now, this makes the SLN file much easier to understand, much easier to work with in Git. So I would encourage you, start checking it out because I think this is the way you want to go eventually going forward. And it does not seem to have many downsides left. At one point, there was no icon. It was, you couldn't double click on it or you couldn't open it in certain ways. Those are pretty much all gone away. They've kind of worked out all the kinks. It's still a preview thing. So I wouldn't just throw it into your, massive production application yet, but start getting used to it because I think that this is the way you want to go forward once it is fully stable and fully baked. Okay, it's probably, I'm assuming the .NET 10 timeframes where we're going to have this be fully baked. I'd love to see this be the default at some point. I'm not sure when that will happen, but until then, something to check out and something to learn how to use. All right, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.